Alright. So, real quick, today we're just going to see what it looks like when you first enter the game. So, when you first sign up and everything, it's going to ask you about which realm to play on. We're actually just going to pick a realm. It's not going to actually show you anything. It's going to pop up and go straight to your character selection. From there, you're going to see all the different races you can choose from on the left. So you'll see humans, dwarves, night elves, gnomes, the Draenei, Worgens, Pandaren, goblins, blood elves, trolls, taurens, undead, and orcs. Those are all the starting ones. The allied races down at the bottom, these you unlock later in game, so I won't really go into them, but I will let you see them. The void elves, the lightforged Draenei, dark iron dwarves, Coltiran, or Coltiran, I don't know, Mechanomes, Volpira, Zandalari trolls, Magar orcs, or Magar, I don't know. All this you read, I don't really know how to pronounce it. High Mountain Tauren, or the Nightborn, and you can always switch between genders as well. So we're going back to the core races, just to show you guys. Once the first thing you're going to want to do is figure out which race you want. Say you like the Blood Elves. Then from there on, you go over here to the classes on the right, and you're going to choose which role you're going to play, which class you want to be. So you can be warriors, you can be paladins, you can be hunters, you can be rogues, you can be a priest. Certain races cannot be certain classes, so blood elves can't be shamans, which the classes that can be shamans, such as like a Tauren can be a shaman. A troll can be a shaman, but blood elves cannot be a shaman. But they can be mages. There's warlocks. There's monks. There's also druids, which blood elves can't be, and demon hunters, which actually blood elves can be. We just can't see them because you can't unlock them until you have someone that's at least level 70 on the realm that you're playing. Death Knights is a hero class, so it starts you out at level 55 instead of level 1. But so I wouldn't recommend starting as a Death Knight, but there's Death Knight. Once you figure out which race and which class you want to be, all you got to do is hit customize and start creating. I will go into what Pandarens actually. I'm getting ahead of myself. Sorry. The difference between the races, you gotta slow down a little bit. There's two different sides. So you see up here it says Horde and Alliance. So if you're going to be on the Alliance, you can only party up and talk to and be friends with people of the Alliance, including all the people on the left here, as well as the Pandarens. Pandarens actually can be Horde or Alliance. They decide which faction they like at level 20. So once they hit 20, they get to choose between Alliance and Horde. I think it's 20, it might be 10, but at some point they get to choose. It probably tells you. If you see down here in the corner, it says more info. You can actually sit here and read all the differences about them. It tells you right there, can join the Horde or Alliance. Each race does have a racial ability they get. It says, should tell you everything right here. They get some bonuses, small bonuses to certain things, like Worgens get increased professions and stuff like that. But we won't go into that. Just that they do get bonuses. So there are some benefits to different races for different things. But real quick, let's just look over here at the different classes. First one on the top, the most known as the warrior, is basically the standard. I carry a weapon and I hit people with it. So it's pretty easy, and it's actually pretty fun. It's the easiest one to really just do because you just kind of hit people. The next one is paladin. You hit people as well. But you also have holy magic, so you can cast spells. There's a couple different differences between the classes. I'll tell you the major ones. There's melee damage. There's range damage, like a hunter who does range damage. But there's spell damage, which is also going to be from a distance. Magic damage. Yeah, I'm getting really far ahead of myself. I'm sorry. But the main thing is that there's 3 different roles that you get to play. Because when you're in the game, you're going to get into a party with people, and to accomplish things. And you're gonna need a tank, a healer, and some damage. So those are the roles: tank, healer, damage. There's different kinds of damage, as I said, but mainly just they're all grouped as damage. So for tanks, what they do is they're going to want to try to, get the attention of all the enemies so that they are the ones taking the damage. So they're going to build themselves up to be heavy in armor and stuff like that. So the paladin, as you can see, would be a tank. The warrior can also be a tank. But the thing is, you can choose to do different. You don't have to be, just because you're a warrior doesn't mean you're a tank. There's different choices in game that you get to pick. So you can be, say, a warrior who uses two-handed weapons only as like a big axe, or you can dual wield as a warrior and use two and do a fury to be a fury spec. It's specialization is what it is. Each class has usually a rate 3 is the standard. There are some with more or less, but 3 is usually a standard, and it's usually a damage, a DPS, and a healer. But if you are a class like a hunter who only does damage, you have 3 different damage specializations. So I want to show you. I'll show you that later as we go into it. But for the general knowledge, what you want to know is that hunters use pets to do damage, but they also use bows or guns. But they can also use just two-handed weapons as well. So they don't have to use ranged weapons. So they're pretty versatile, but they only do damage. Rogues do damage too, just damage. They like to use daggers, and they're stealthy about it. They can also use poison. So they try to sneak up and get behind characters as they go. Priests use holy magic to heal people, but they can also use shadow damage to cause pain to people. So they're pretty versatile. I wouldn't recommend doing it if you want to play solo. Then the classes you want to go with, like if you're going to play a lot by yourself and just do, say, quests and not really dungeon a lot, but you're going to end up dungeoning. But if you just want to stay away and just learn more about the story of the game, you can just do quests and stuff. As a warrior can be pretty good solo. Paladin is almost the most ideal for playing by yourself, just because they can heal themselves and they can last for a long time. Their stamina. Hunters are pretty good solo, just because their pets can cause be their tanks, so they can handle a bunch of stuff, and they have a class or a specialization called survival, so to help to keep them alive. But as I said, rogues I don't think are that great at playing solo. But in groups, it's fine. You get to be... There's 2 different ways to play. You're going to either want to be PvP oriented, which means player versus player, which means you're going to fight other people playing characters, or player versus environment, PvE, which is the other way to go, where you're just dungeoning. You're grouping up with other players to take on enemies and just kind of play around in the world. It's pretty fun stuff. There's a lot to do, so I mean, it all comes. You'll start out small, and you'll learn things along the way. And you can create any class. You don't have to stick with that class. You can always choose another class, make multiple characters. But once you choose a character, that character, unless you pay, there's a service you can pay to change the class. But otherwise, you're stuck. You're staying with that character and that class. But you can pay to change some stuff later if you want. If you're attached to a character. But once you just, let me continue on, I suppose. Mage is just damage. They do fire magic, frost magic, or arcane magic. Those are the 3 specializations, so they can choose from. You're gonna stay. You can be solo, but it's gonna be harder just because you're gonna be more of like trying to stay away from the enemy and to stay alive. You're not gonna be trying to, hit people with your weapons. You're gonna use magic, so you can't stay right in front of someone's face and just cast magic for that long. And you don't have any healing spells, so you can't heal yourself. Warlocks are a little more a little heavier. They can survive a little better than a mage would. They have magic spells as well. They use fire and shadow and curses and stuff. So they're like witches. So if you like witches, they can summon demons and stuff. And like I said, you can change your genders as well. So if you think you want to be a witch, go with a warlock. The next thing on here is a monk. Monks are a little less traditional because they were added later in game. They can be a healer, tank, or damage, but they use hand-to-hand combat. But they also use mystical powers to heal. So, and then there's a thing called a brewmaster, and that's the tanking class. That's a specialization called brewmaster, and you use like different random techniques to mitigate damage, which means to just kind of use stagger damage. You don't take all the damage at once, you slow it down, or just lessen the amount of damage. That's how you tank as a monk. but they're pretty interesting class as a class. We're not gonna go into Death Knight, as I said, because that's for it automatically turns you to level 55. You don't want to start out at level 55 unless you know how to play or have played before. So, but Death Knights are just kind of a darker paladin. I mean, they're like a mix between a warrior and with some more abilities. They can raise some dead. They can do some extra undead, earthly, like creepy stuff. So they're kind of interesting. I haven't really played around too much, but I got to change races so I can show you the other remaining classes. The shaman uses like earth magic to do stuff. They can be a damage or a tank, or not a tank, sorry, damage or healer. And they use like water magic to do heals. They can summon fire elementals. They have totems that they use that can do different, give them bonuses, buffs, damage, and stuff like that. Yeah, they use just earthy magic. They have a cool. They're the ones that use lightning bolt. If you feel that, they're pretty interesting. The only flaw I see is that you can only be certain races to be a shaman. Like dwarves can be shamans, Draenei, trolls, taurens, and goblins, and I believe Pandarans can too. So you have some choices, but not all of them. It depends on what race you like. You're pulled towards, drawn towards. After shaman, the other class that you can be is druid, and those are also confirmed. You can only be night elves, or worgens, or trolls, or taurens to be druids. So they're pretty limited, but they have some cool abilities because they can turn into animals. So you can turn into a bear, and then in which case you would be a bear when you tank. You would protect people as a bear. You can turn into a cat and do damage. And as a cat, you're more like a rogue. These are different specializations, so you can switch between specializations in game. But once you pick a specialization, you stay with that throughout whatever you're doing. So if you're in a group, usually you stay at that. You pick a spec. You can't just switch specs whenever. I mean, you can, but it takes a moment to switch, and it does change certain stats. So it is something you usually You usually choose a role before you commit to something, and then that role being damage, tank, or healer, and then unless something happens in the middle of it where you're asked to switch, or you switch to help aid in different role, you stick with that role as a healer, a damage, or a tank. So as I said, druids can change into different animals and do different things. They also turn into a thing called a moonkin to do damage. That's when they do spell damage instead of the cat who does melee damage. They can turn into a moonkin, which is sort of an owl bear. So they can turn into that. And there's a lot of stuff that we'll go into later that makes it a little more interesting. The last class, the Demon Hunter, I can't show you on this realm. Only because you have to have a level 70. If I hit class trial, actually, it'll let me show you. Just to show you what it looks like. Demon Hunters are sort of a versatile. They can be only. This is weird. They can only be tanks or damage. They only have 2 specializations, which is less than most. Actually, less than all of them. So they do a mix of melee damage with some increased, just sort of like a death. Like they're a hero class as well. So they start out at level 98. But they can only be night elves or blood elves. And yeah, they're pretty cool. They have a lot going on. They're just like a hip class. They're not as, they can't be categorized as warriors. They can turn into demons, and they just do basically melee damage though, with just the ability to mobility to get around faster and do different things. So once you figure out, say, who you're gonna be, like a human paladin, you would hit customize. Once you do this, you can see that you can change a few things: skin color, their face, which does change the eye color, as well as lips and sort of the expression. Your character, you won't really see them much, but you can these things here on the screen, the customizations, you can change in game at a barbershop. So don't feel like you won't be able to. You're stuck with this. As I said, you can create more characters too, and so you're not just like forced to be anyone. Hairstyle, hair color, and each. Since I'm under class trial, let me go back to. Well, you can see down here the specializations I was talking about. See, as a paladin, I can be holy, protection, or retribution. So, and you see the symbols, that there's a plus symbol here, that means the healing. The tank shield, the shield icon means it's a tank. And then the sword icon means it's damage. So as a paladin, you have the choice between 3 different specs, and it actually tells you which spec does what: tank, healing, or retribution. This only shows up if you're doing a class trial. Uh, um, so if you want to start out at 110 just to see what it's like later on in game. But we're doing level 1, so it doesn't matter. So you choose your hair color, and you can then choose the piercings. You can't really see right now under her hair because her ears are covered. But you can change that in-game, and each race has a different function like that. The next thing, you can either hit randomize down here on a name, or if you know of a name you just want to come up with, say, tea leaf. Tea leaves. It'll say, oh, that name is unavailable. Sorry, someone else is named Tea Leaves. I didn't know that was going to be Tea Leaf. People like tea. That's weird. I've always randomly, usually with names there, you can have one, every realm has the ability to have individual characters. So there can be a pelican on every single realm. And it's just their name will be tied to that realm. So on Illyria, there's now a Pelicaninja, Paladin Druid. So that's what happens when you create a character. It shows up on your list here under the realm. If you were to hit change realm, it would give you the list of realms, and the characters you have created are going to be listed right next to it, how many characters you have on that realm. And it also tells you the population, which doesn't really matter too much. And then you'll see the type. It says normal, as well as RP. So those are the only two there are now. There used to be 3 different kinds, but normal basically just means normal. RP stands for roleplay. What that would mean is it is a role-playing game. That's what it's called, a massive multiplayer role-playing game. So you do fill the role of different characters. You can play, but most of the time you don't really have to. Nobody goes around playing like, I need a sword. Bring me this sword of steel I need, and stuff like that. But if you went to a role-playing server, an RP server, you could probably find something called, a guild of people who might actually be into that. Oh, and it's more probably expected. There's a certain etiquette. I haven't played much on an RP server, but from what I've seen, it's not really, nobody really role plays all the time. You might go there for the population or something. Determining your realm, there's a different, population might make you want to choose a certain realm. Say you want a lower population, but you're not going to find as many players. It might be harder, more difficult for you to accomplish things with less players. So the higher ones are going to have more people, more opportunities, but there can also be more people on one side of the faction. There might be a very heavy populated, say, Horde faction. Horde, everyone might be Horde on one server, and like very few people are Alliance, or the other way around. There are a lot, it really, you don't know. So you could either pick one randomly or do some research online to find out which realm may fit for you. As far as time zones go, they are separated. There's different time zones, but for the most part, you can play on any of them. Most of them pretty much work out. I'm not going to go into what happens once you create the character. You would hit enter world, and each race has its own starting area where all the level 1s show up, and then you can start out the beginning quests and do tutorials and stuff to start leveling up. And I don't want to do that yet. I'll do that next time. I just wanted to show you what happens when you enter the game, what you're going to be seeing, and what you're going to be picking. As I said, you can create multiple characters, so there's no limit. There's a limit. You can have 50 characters per account, so across all the realms up to 50, unless they've changed it. They do add things, change things. But last time I checked, it was 50 per account. Each realm you can have a certain amount of characters on. I've had 13 at least on one, so I'm pretty sure they change that as you go. Right now I have 14, it says, on Trollbane. So on Illyria, which I just did too, we'll go into what it looks like when you enter the game later. I just wanted to show you a brief intro as to what happens when you first enter the game and the minor things. I didn't want to go into too much detail. As I said, you can fool around, pick out different characters, and see how you feel, which one makes you feel more comfortable.